All right. Welcome, everybody, to Adobe Developers Live. I love that intro. Kind of reminds me of Doctor Who music. If you're a fan of Doctor Who, that's, I don't know, very cool. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be watching this from, or where in the world you happen to be if you're watching the recording of this. Welcome. So today we have an amazing show planned for you. We'll be talking about Adobe Experience Manager, building composable experiences, and we're going to dive into essentially what we've been cooking up here in the labs at Adobe, as well as what is available in production for developers to leverage and to delight their customers with. So welcome, everyone. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to bring on to stage Cedric. Cedric is the Director of Product Management for Adobe Experience Manager. Welcome, Cedric.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, man, your audio sounds fantastic, dude.
Great.
So yeah, excellent. How are things with you today?
It's good. It's bright and early here in San Francisco, 7:30 a.m. So
Right on.
I'm excited to get going.
That is excellent. All right. So you've got some interesting stuff to share with us today about the web and Adobe Experience Manager and the future, right?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I think for those folks who maybe, again, I'm product management lead, and today is obviously like there's no shortage of excitement today. I don't know if you folks saw the announcement that Adobe made this morning. It's not related to AEM, but it's excited to what we do at Adobe here. And it's just a quick shout out to our folks over on the Photoshop team. They launched a generative fill. Again, I don't want to distract you too much from what we're going to talk about right now, but it's super exciting. So let's get into it.
Outstanding. All right. That is fantastic. So yeah, definitely Firefly is fantastic for everyone who's creative or not. It's a great tool. So let's jump into some slides here, and we'll go through, we're going to have Bertrand in a little bit later, as well as Meryl, to really show, Meryl's going to show exactly a lot of what we're talking about kind of at the front end of the show. So you'll be able to see exactly what direction we're going, and yeah, should be exciting. Okay, so we've got exceptional web experiences and web platform, productization process, composable services, and then I'll wrap up at the end with some session previews to kind of give you a highlight of where the day is going and what we've got planned for you. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I will jump off and we'll hand it over to you, Cedric.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's talk about exceptional experience. I know for those folks who've been around, who've seen the last Developers Live, I kind of ended the keynote with that topic. Something that's in our mind, obviously, or top of our mind, is really how do we allow you folks to create exceptional experiences, and what does that actually mean? So today, we want to spend part of that keynote to dig in a little deeper on what that is and what we have in mind and what we're working on. There's two, I think of, if you think the AEM world, there's two kind of major shifts that we are doing. And for those folks who listened in to what we did at Summit, we're starting to talk about that. So today we are going to take the next step, and we're going to show you folks what we've been working on and where we think the AM is going, but also just not just AM, just generally also the web is going. And we certainly want to align there from that point of view. And so let's talk about, and then again, maybe kind of a quick flashback. I mentioned last time the website in the top corner there is the website, and these are a few screenshots here, but of websites that are live. And well, I talked about that website of how what we transitioned to create a site that is always fast, right? And what does it mean to create websites that are always fast? So something that's really fascinating for us, just from the technology point of view. Like, what does it mean to create websites that are always fast and fast for everyone? And what is it actually? What actually happens if you build a website that is always fast? Right. So there's two things, right? One thing, the technology aspect of it, but then also what happens to your business if you in fact do that. So I do want to talk about this. And so what we've been doing, and again, we've been working on that for a while. And so the reason why is, I'll step back. Creating websites that are always fast is technically really hard. I know sometimes folks think, it's easy, just do a little bit of this and it's always fast. All right, so that's why we felt like, okay, we want to try it ourselves. And so these examples here are sites that we worked on directly with the clients together, with the customers together, and our esteemed partners, in order to really try that out and see where's the challenge, right? And there's of course, there's one thing, the Lighthouse score, right? And on the other hand, you got real world data. And both of those are really helpful to kind of, I guess, measure and validate that. So one of the things that we've been doing is really trying to figure out how can we get sites run that have a mobile Lighthouse score of 100, right? So which is super challenging. And then on the other hand, what does that mean for real world? So when you think of real world, most visitors today, decent bandwidth, depending on which geography you're coming from. It gets really interesting when you build sites for global, because global, of course, devices and bandwidth might not be as available as if you live in one of the big metropolitan cities, or you have like good internet infrastructure, or if it's a website that is being used by folks that are traveling more, or by folks. So it's really interesting to achieve that that ability for most visitors to get the website up. So if we can click one more here, our goal is, and basically if you do Lighthouse score mobile of 100, what you basically achieve, this number is kind of arbitrary, right? What you actually achieve is that 95% of your visitors will get a largest contentful pane, which means you get the website presented visually in front of you, below 2.5 seconds, which is obviously very fast. And I think that is something that is exactly what we're aiming for. And so another aspect of it, and we're going to go into technology shortly, and what does that mean, and how we feel like we can achieve that from the technology point of view. I want to talk a little bit about what happens if you actually do that. I know you can build a small site and thing. So we've one of the first sites that we started moving into that. And while we don't achieve, and I have to say very transparently, while we don't achieve yet a Lighthouse score of 100 on Adobe.com, on some of the Adobe.com properties, and I can talk about this in a bit of why and the challenges behind that. Even though we haven't achieved the mobile Lighthouse score of 100 on some of the Adobe.com properties that we moved or changed, as we have seen significant improvements in some of the key metrics. Is just, again, I'll leave conversion aside for now. I don't want to disclose any conversion numbers here that we have here at Adobe. I would love to, though. But it's really about what happens. Folks spent more time on more time on the site, which I think is relevant because they spent more time reading, more time clicking around, visiting more pages, right? Bounce rate is going down, which is kind of the same thing, but you kind of like, instead of going to a page and us loading, and you're so quickly moving on to another task of being distracted. And so as soon as something takes a little too long, we'll just often do something else. So you really see that changing by folks are not going away, and they're really staying as I guess a captive audience, right? And I think that's the key part. Now we're working with our customers here, which I obviously cannot necessarily disclose customer data here either, but we're working on, and we certainly want to in the future also disclose a lot more real world examples that we have with our customers that we're working with right now, that what that meant for them, in particular in commerce. That is really interesting, and there's obviously lots of quotes of folks not AEM related, right? Like non-AEM related examples and studies that have been done of what it means if your website gets 1 or 2 seconds faster to load. What does it mean to your business as a sense of conversion? And I think that's certainly the piece that we're super interested in, and really trying to build the infrastructure and the technology for our brands and our partners to build experiences that are that fast, and for our customers to unlock that opportunity. All right. So with that, I want to talk about technology a little bit, and I want to give it over to Bertrand to talk about the web platform and why the web platform is such a key ingredient for us in order to achieve that performance. All right, Bertrand, take it away.
Thanks, Cedric. So I'm the tech guy here. I'm principal scientist in the AM team, and as we can see on the next slide, I've been doing web for quite a while, 25 years actually. My first web project was in 1998 for the Swiss Parliament. We took a database, pretty similar to what we do today. We took a database which was Basis Plus at the time, something a bit exotic, and we wrote Java code to generate a website out of it and published a website. It's not the website that we see on the left. What we see on the left here is the original or early web page of Wikipedia, but something similar. Very simple layout, text and links. We probably had a few images already at the time on my example website. But the content is here. You can click through the links and the links work, and you get content, you get what you need. But obviously, very basic layout and presentation and interactions. It was already, I had to check actually, the JavaScript existed at the time, and that's the case. So it was already using HTML for the markup, some very basic CSS, and JavaScript, also some very basic JavaScript. So all the same ingredients that we were still continuing to use, but in a very basic form. The good thing is that, and I wrote a blog post on that called "The Web Platform is Back." Maybe Gilles can post a link in Bevy. It was the same technologies, same group of technologies, but we had little options. In HTML was much simpler, CSS was very simple, JavaScript was super simple. So in a way, it was easier because we had less choices to make, and it worked. It was very reliable, very simple. In the meantime, and we can praise jQuery for that, and maybe blame all of us who've been abusing jQuery and other frameworks to do things that maybe could have been done in a simpler way. In the meantime, we saw the emergence of a number of web frameworks, JavaScript web frameworks, that help do things that browsers couldn't do in those times, because there were browsers limitations, compatibility issues. The models were too simple for when you needed to do interactive stuff. So at some point, we really needed the JavaScript web frameworks, and this caused the explosion of a flurry of them. With many changes, sometimes incompatible, with specialized tools to manage them, all a bit complicated or very complicated in some cases, but filling gaps that were material, that were problematic for us to do what we needed to do. But still, I think already in that period, we abused the use of these frameworks by saying, you need a framework even for a simple website. And in many cases, that was not true. You could do it in a simpler way. And today, I think with the evolution of the web standards that we'll see a bit later, with the evolution of web standards, with the browsers getting better, with the evergreen web concept where browsers are updated automatically and you can count on the vast majority of your users having up-to-date browsers, we think really the web platform is back. It didn't really, it never really went away, but we kind of distanced ourselves from the web platform with all these layers that we added in between and that were not always needed. And we think today these layers are much less needed. You can read, we're not the only ones to think like that. You can find lots of people on the web who agree with us uh, that getting back to the basics of the web platform is totally possible today for the vast majority of cases, and these standards have evolved immensely. So it's still HTML and CSS and JavaScript, but the proportions have been changing over time. And now we think we're back to a web where you can, stay with HTML for go quite a long way with just HTML, semantic HTML. That also makes your markup better. That gives you accessibility out of the box or in an easier way. Then add just the level of CSS that you need. And CSS also become much more powerful, meaning that you will need much less JavaScript. Maybe no JavaScript at all for a simple website, or just for the interactions, or to do some simple rendering manipulation on the client. Really, the proportion has been changing, and we think today that we should limit our use of the JavaScript frameworks to the bare minimum. And as we'll see on the next slide, um, I wanted to show a bit more concretely what this means. What are these improvements? Interestingly, I'm not the front-end specialist, and thanks to my colleague Julien Rombaud for helping, revise and refine this slide here. But I know enough to talk about it with specialists, which is useful. So if you look at HTML, there's many new elements. Still, obviously, since I started 25 years ago, there's been lots of stuff. But in the last few years, we've seen some very interesting things added to HTML. Things like the summary element, where you can do, accordion-like open and close details, dialogue elements for more powerful dialogues, buttons, and things like that. So this gives us more semantic markup. The HTML is more expressive and defines more clearly what the markup means. It also helps a lot with accessibility. If you need to create accessible web pages, and you should, these things, you will benefit from all the knowledge that's been put into these standard elements in terms of accessibility, instead of having to implement it yourself. And it means less JavaScript code, because you get lots of valid and interesting behaviors out of the box. So I think HTML has the progress of HTML helps tremendously in bringing this web platform back, so to say. If we go to CSS, I think the changes are maybe even bigger with CSS. The CSS of today doesn't have much to do with the CSS of my early times. With things like grids and the flexbox, sticky positioning, the has selector, which is pretty recent but extremely powerful. These things allow you to write simpler CSS, which is also more expressive, more powerful, which is clearer, easier to understand if you look at someone else's CSS that you have to maintain. And again, this means less JavaScript code, and it can make a really big difference in terms of how much JavaScript you need to achieve the layout that you want. So I think it's really worth it to study all the new CSS goodies and use them in your projects. We'll see on later how to decide what you can use or not. JavaScript has also progressed a lot, immensely, in the last 10 years, I would say, with imports, classes, async, arrow functions, etc. It's become a much nicer language while keeping its power. JavaScript is very powerful once you look a bit under the hood. So it's much improved, but again, we think you can use it much less, and really, you should really go through this ladder. So say, okay, let's go as far as we can with just HTML, then add CSS, and go as far as we can with just HTML and CSS, and then in the last stage, add the minimum amount of JavaScript that we need. And if you have a small amount of JavaScript, it's totally okay. Browsers are very efficient today, so if your JavaScript is reasonably small, the performance will remain very good. One last element that is important mentioning, we won't have time to dig in, but just wanted to mention it, is web components, which are basically custom HTML elements that you can implement yourself, which have scoped CSS styles, which is very useful if you want to use these components in a different context than the one where they were created. They are very good for progressive enhancement. You can, for example, take a list of images, which is a plain UL list, and decorate it with a custom element that implements the carousel behavior, for example. And if you write web components, that's durable code. It's standards based. So, the web component spec is not going to change in 2 years. It is stable. So, which makes it maybe a bit less, complete than web frameworks. You might need to write a bit more code, but it's very stable. So it's a great way of writing components that you can use for a long time. And on the next slide, we'll see the resources that I suggest to discover, study, understand the web platform. That's just my choice. There's many others, but I think these are a great core set of resources. Mozilla Developer Network, MDN, it's often called the user manual of the web. It has all the specs that you need, and with examples, tutorials. It's a fantastic resource that's maintained collaboratively by browser vendors and volunteers. So I think it's a very nice, for me, it's the go-to resource for the web platform. Baseline is something that's pretty new, a unified view of stable web features. It's basically the browser vendors getting together to define and document what you can use. Something is in baseline if it's available in the last 2 versions of major browsers, meaning that if it's in baseline, it's fairly safe to use for your projects. So it's a great way to decide, what you can use or not. Can I use is an older thing, but very complete and very useful. It goes in the same direction to explain or to document precisely what you can use on which version of each browser. And the last one is really, if you want to dig deeper or much deeper, webplatformtest.org. That's the final truth on browsers, cross browser test suite for the web platform stack, to which you can contribute, to that you can read the code to understand the details on how things work. So I think with these resources, you should have be able to get a good understanding of how the web platform works. So with this, I hope I've convinced you that the web platform is back. And back to you, Cedric.
Thank you. So interesting, kind of, and I summarize. Well, there's people, but so you folks say we shouldn't use React or what? So we're not saying that. What we're saying is that use the right tool or the right framework for the right things you want to build. And I think we have this performance first, and I'm going to get into the slide here in a bit. Performance first architecture or performance first strategy. And so you should pick technology that will really help you to achieve your goal. And if performance is our number one goal, because it drives conversion, because it drives engagement with the visitors, right? So we should really pick our technology wisely. And so what you will see us doing here, and the sites that we've built out there, I don't want to call it a framework because it's the web platform, but we're leveraging that to the utmost possible. And then again, as Bertrand said, we're using JavaScript where it's needed in order to optimize that. And I think I know it's always just like, okay, is it as fast as a static web page, right? So this comparison, it's depending on how you measure. I think the things that we're building, an argument could be made with the way we're doing that is it's faster than static, and you're like, oh, how is that even possible, right? Because we're kind of optimizing the output for making sure that whatever's in the viewport gets rendered first, and then everything that's not in the viewport of the browser gets rendered later. So these are things that, they're not yet a part of the web platform to do these things. So we are certainly also working with browser vendors and the larger web ecosystem to actually establish these kind of patterns within the web platform. So again, to avoid some of the JavaScript that we still need in order to, you can think deliver websites that are faster than if you would build them with a static HTML, right? So delivering web performance is not just client side, which is talked about quite a bit, the web platform, but it's also server side. So what do you have to do server side? And so that in achieving a 95% visitors globally in 2.5 seconds, below 2.5 seconds. Again, you can't just do this with client side strategy, that if you think of what we just talked about, but it also needs a server that is doing that. So what we're proposing here and what we have been working on, and again, it's in production already in use by some of the clients, and we will have sessions later today where we talk about that, is we're establishing this Edge Publishing Delivery Service as part of AEM that is basically responsible for delivering the server-side piece of the experience. So it's also it's kind of like a I would say it's a new development on our end, because we had to really rethink of what it means if to achieve this performance first. There's a few things we need to do on the server. There's a few things that we need to do how to prepare the content, how to prepare images, videos, and everything that's required in order to achieve that. So that's why we established this new Edge Publishing Delivery Service. It is running on the edge. So this is not like an origin service or so, where you have a server or something. So this is code that runs natively on the edge by default. If you think of that, there's no origins. There's only a distributed set of services that are running on the edge. The gray bars on the next to it are really the services that Adobe has. And again, these are up to you to use or not. And or you can use your other services that you want to use that might also run on the edge. Important certainly is that the whole stack server side needs to be built in a way that any kind of lookups, any kind of things that are required to be done on, if you think of the server, or in this case, the edge, that they're also edge located in order to really achieve that performance, because you can't really, I guess, afford to go to origin. If you think of origin, again, in the AEM side of things, there's no origin anymore, but other services that you might use still have an origin. So you have to make sure that you architect that in a way that you would avoid the origin lookup, or it's delayed and not really required for LCP, right? We also built that service, and again, we're going to talk about that way more today. Anyway, that it's here for AEM, but it's also here for other tools to publish to. So, and that's something we're going to talk about a little later here in the keynote. But I think I want to close that performance session here, talk about performance, and go to the next topic. But in summary, Adobe is very focused on building the infrastructure, building the services for you folks out there, and for, again, customer or partner, to really build web experiences that are engaging, they're personalized, you have experimentation, you get everything you wanted with a LiDAR score of 100, and 95% of the visitors get that site into below 2.5 seconds. So that's our mission, and that's what we're on, and we hope you folks join us in that mission for us to, again, build out the product, but also you folks joining us, building experiences on that, that will actually achieve those goals, and we can all kind of benefit from building faster websites. All right, so talking about how do we work with customers? All right, you're on mute. I think I see you moving.
I am on mute. Yeah, no, so that was fantastic. So this mission that we're on, you think about building product as head of product, what does that look like today that's different than it was, 6 months, a year ago? And how are we adapting to getting to market faster and, working with customers in a new way?
Correct. Yeah, good, very good point. Thank you for, I think, really teeing that up here. The traditional enterprise software development workflow is me, product manager, my team, extended team. We'll go talk to you folks about requirements, writing specs, working with engineering, going forth and back, iterative over it, doing alpha, beta shit. Again, we've been all doing this for, like, I don't know, I've been doing it for 20 years. And we're going to change that. Because one thing that we've really seen is that really having the concrete production experience during the development phase makes a huge difference of how you generally build software. So let me walk you through our new process for productization that we started using. And again, this is like 6 months ago or so, we started introducing that. So this is not brand new here. We've already been working on that. On one hand, we think about you folks, there's a job to be done. What do you want to do? We talk to you folks, and that won't go away. We need to discuss requirements. We need to discuss what do you want to do? What is the goal? What's the challenges, right? Then, if we feel like this is something that we really want to solve, we're going to put our arms around it, and we're going to put a team around it and says, let's figure this out. So it's not like we're going to take requirements and work on it. We're going to work with you directly in order to implement this problem or this challenge or whatever you're trying to solve in production. So we want to work on that, and we're going to get it to production. We call this the takeoff phase. We want to take off with a capability and use it in production to prove it out end to end. So we want to see the people clicking on it, the people developing it, the one that writes the lines of code, and really with you folks developing the capability. And in order to move to the next section, which is the mid-flight section. The mid-flight section is we have one or more customer in production. So we really want to scale it. Scale it means we want to find other folks that have the same challenge. We want to join others. So it's, again, us being directly involved with you folks to do that. And then ultimately, if we do reach consensus, this is a capability that has general appeal. There's really value there. What we're going to do then is we're going to make this a GA feature, a GA capability in the product, and obviously then make it available to everyone. So there's two ways to look at this. It's always like good and bad, right? The good thing is, and we've been doing this for a while now, so we can talk about that, is we deliver features or capabilities that are rock solid because they're proven and they work in production. The downside is it takes us longer to ship things, but I think it's fine. I think that's fair. We think that's a fair trade-off that we have in order for us to do that. Now, again, that's not generally saying that everything takes longer, but it certainly is. But versus think of building a feature, just put it in the product, and GA it, and then we'll see if somebody uses it, right? But let's talk a little bit more about how do we do that takeoff phase.
Yeah.
So we call it VIP projects. Again, the way that works is a clear goal of what needs to be achieved. All hands on deck in sense of we've got engineering, we got you folks involved, and we're basically, as a project, if you think of it that way, implement the feature or implement the capability, and want to get to you folks in production as quick as possible. Again, we had some of those projects where we went into production like 2 weeks. We had some that go like for 2 months. Again, the timeline is not always, depending on the complexity of the capability, of course, that we're working on. But it has shown, it is kind of, we call it VIP projects. The VIP projects have shown that, again, we were able to deliver significant value for our customers, and being able to prove it out. And with that, move this capability to the next stage, and then also ultimately, GAing a capability for that. So go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. The slide that you started with, so all of those websites that you showed, they all went through this?
Correct. Yes. So the websites that I showed earlier, all the screenshots of the sites that are live, and they went through that VIP process in order to get to the point where we can call this technology GA. And again, we've learned a lot because every single one of those had its unique challenges, and where we had to make adjustments, and where we had to figure out how to conquer a certain challenge. And I think that is the exciting part also for us as a software vendor to be much closer to the actual implementation and to deliver technology that, again, is also, I think, the other, I guess, positive side effect is where, at least that's our opinion, you folks can rate us on that, okay? We feel like we're able to deliver technology that's easier to implement and quicker to implement, because as we kind of see if you think of it that way, we kind of see the pain, if you think that way. Like sometimes, we deal with features, and I have to admit that in the past that we're like, maybe it wasn't that easy to implement. I know. So I think that's the other thing, given that us being involved, we also want to make sure, again, very transparent here and open, that we want to deliver technology that is approachable, and is quick to implement, and is very well documented, and has lots of tutorials, because again, we ourselves went through this process with clients to get it into production, and with that also having that part kind of those features. One thing is the capability, but the other one is actually using and implementing it. That this is also well established and well documented.
All right, that was very great, very cool. So let's jump into the next section.
All right, so so you're gonna see demos soon. Okay, hang in there just for a little bit more. We're gonna show demos. I know. It's like, where are the demos? Where's the cool stuff? Okay, it's coming. Let me talk about another big shift in the CMS space, or generally in a content creation space, that has happened and is obviously still happening. When most of the CMSs, including AEM, were designed and architected, we were still sending Word documents as attachments in emails. Okay. So today, most of you folks probably do not do that anymore. At least I hope so. You should stop doing that, okay, really. But the content is in repositories: SharePoint, Google Docs, Notion, Airtable, Box. I don't know. There's so many places where content lives today. And just that fact that content is already in the cloud, if you want to say it that way, why don't we just take it from there? Why don't we just leverage? Why do we have to copy paste it into the CMS? Why do we have to move it into the CMS to publish it? It's already in the cloud. So I think that's one thing, right? And then what does that mean for the CMS if you do that? Right? So yes, you still want to have governance, you still want control, you still want to have all these. If you think of CMS services versus a CMS server, right? The CMS services that you need review approval, whatnot. So there's all these things that you need, and they're still valid and very relevant in order to publish content to the web, to the public, and kind of making that continuous improvement on that content, creating the experiences, the templates, the components, and all that, right? That's all needed still. But what happens to the CMS if the repository of the content for the web is already in multiple repositories? So let's go to the next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I call it the bottomless CMS. I know it's like a little bit of a joke, but you get the point. There's the headless CMS, which is the CMS that has all the content in the repositories, nicely structured and organized, and there's APIs, and you can deliver it where you want it. But what happens if we turn this around and we say, we get all the CMS services, but the repository, there's multiple things. You can have Office, SharePoint here, thing over there, right? So in this case, the CMS becomes bottomless because it doesn't have a repository or doesn't necessarily need a repository. Now, again, that's maybe a little further out here, but I mean, AEM has a repository. JCR is not going to go away. But what our strategy is we really open up to other places where the content is. And we really want to build our CMS services in a way that they can interact with multiple repository types, allow you to really use the native tools that those repositories have to actually do the authoring, but bring in the CMS services into these tools to really reach that broad audience of people that really need to manage the content, right? And I think this CMS, yes, we said we'd solve the webmaster bottleneck. Yeah, we might have done that, but we didn't really solve this. Like, there's so many people want to contribute content that it was still kind of a choke point there. So we really hope to solve that choke point by opening up authoring in any cloud repository, if you think of it that way. Now, for now, you can talk about it later too, because we support SharePoint and Google Docs as the first ones, and you're going to see us adding more. We also support GitHub, actually. So GitHub and SharePoint and Google Docs, and we're going to add more to really make that and transform. If you think of the CMS services, the CMS capabilities that we have, to be independent of the repository. It's time for demo. Let's do it. I'll get Meryl on stage. We want to show you some of the things around those bottomless CMS services, if you want to call them that way. So Meryl, take it away.
Good morning, good evening to everyone, and thank you for having me. Super happy to be here and to show you a couple of demos out of what our engineering team on the AM side is working on right now. And hopefully this is going to resonate with a couple of interesting topics that have been discussed by Cedric, Ron, and Bertrand just earlier. Let's have a look, first of all, at the bottomless CMS, such as Cedric just introduced it to you. And hopefully afterwards, we will also be able to have a look at some live and concrete example from our approach towards VIP projects and how a customer-based requirement can lead to innovation. That said, I will get started with a first demo that will show you the universal editor that you will also be able to see a bit later in Sharanya's and Arthur's session with more details. Let's have a look at this page, this application, which is available online on the internet. Very important details. The application itself is not hosted on AEM-CS infrastructure at all. I don't even know where it's hosted actually, and it's not really important. And it's not built using any AEM-CS front-end capability. It's a pure React app that is actually consuming content from AEM. And what I'm going to show you is how, with very simple instrumentation on the front-end side, it is possible to turn this application into a page that's actually edited in the universal editor. Let me just, for that, inspect the page. And what you need to look at is, first of all, in the head tag, there is the first very slight instrumentation being done to tell the editor what is the underlying content repository source. So here we see it's an authoring instance behind the scenes. Secondly, whenever you want to make some content editable, and you don't have to make every content editable, you have to instrument the proper section or other HTML element with the proper identification that points to some content. Here, we see, obviously, it's coming from a content fragment that is stored into the DAM, while we could find also at some other places, like probably below, that the content could come from a regular CQ page that you all know already pretty well. Once the instrumentation is done, I can switch to the universal editor, and I just need to point the universal editor to the deployed URL, which provides me then the full page editable in context of the production deployment. So right now I am in the preview mode, and I can preview the page as if I was a real user. But I'm also able to very easily switch to the text edition capability and to select here the various areas of the page which have been instrumented for edition capability. Here, for example, the text. And I could easily correct it. Let's say that actually this is wrong. It's not in Norway, but in Iceland. Just changing something here. I could also here edit the rich text and add something more like any kind of message, and I could, of course, enrich the text with some additional styling and so on, with the result being immediately available in production. And I think this is really interesting based on what was discussed before by Cedric, by Bertrand, and by Ron, in the sense that what you're seeing here is a completely decoupled authoring experience. Whatever the persistence is actually, whether this is content fragment or CQ page or anything else as we will see after, and whatever is the front-end framework which is being used to render the page is not important for the practitioner, who can focus on their task, making the content as relevant as possible for the audience that they are building for. Alongside with the text editing capabilities, the team is also working towards bringing additional features like in-context image and asset management. For now, you can see that you're getting some preview of the assets which is being rendered alongside with the location path and other metadata. In the future, you will be able to drag and drop the assets directly in the context of the page. And last but not least, the component overview, where as a practitioner, I can edit then the components should they have some non-visual properties to be dealt with. So this is the first demo I wanted to show you. And keep in mind the first lesson that actually business practitioners should not be worried about the content persistence nor the technology that's used to render the page, and rather be able to focus on their main task, which is managing content and creating experiences with the less burden as possible. Let me now switch to a second demo. And here we will have another variation of the weekend website that you know pretty well. The interesting thing here is that actually the technology that has been used to host the content and to manage the content primarily is not AMCS JCR repository at all. It's actually Google Drive. So all the content that you're seeing being rendered here is actually managed completely in a Google Drive folder. And again, the universal editor with the right instrumentation allows easily practitioners to edit the page in context of the page independently from any kind of performance that's being used. Let's say I would like to modify, for example, this text here. I will simply edit it here in context. And before that, I want to show you that, of course, I'm not cheating. This is a live demo. So you can see that in the corresponding Google Sheet where we are actually storing the content, there is the previous label. I'm going to just change this text and let's add something like for ADL participants, because I think we all deserve it. Let me change the focus, which will, as you can see in the progress bar above, trigger the publication of the content to the underlying repository. And once this is done, I'm switching back to the Google Sheet, and actually the title has been refreshed accordingly to my change. And this is valid not only for this title, but for the whole website, which is managed here as Google Sheets, sorry for the lapses, and other Google documents. I think what is interesting here is not only the fact that we are decoupling once again the authoring and practicing experience from the source. It's also very important in the fact that we are working as close as possible to the practitioner requirements. Not later than 2 weeks ago, I was discussing with a customer who told us that actually to manage their content fragments, they are initially entering the whole content in some Excel file. So not Google Sheet file in the case, but Excel file, before they copy paste back into the content fragment editor. Imagine that if with this approach, they could actually skip one step and directly edit the content in the context of the production, looking at the page being rendered, while actually updating the content directly in the underlying Excel sheet. And this is a gain of time and a faster time to value for the customers. Let me come back to the third demo I would like to show you today. And I will come back to the other website that we were having a look at before. And what I want to show you now is that the universal editor allows actually and fosters core innovation as a central hub for experience management. Independently, again, from the underlying repository or content source, independently from the framework that's used to build the front end, we are able here through the Universal Editor to add additional features that will be valuable for our customers or business practitioners, and from which they will be able to benefit without having to be worried about side porting a feature for one or the other systems. What I'm going to show you here is something quite new. If you have been attending the summit in the US, you have probably seen it already. Otherwise, this will be new for you. But we have been working towards bringing some GenAI capabilities, leveraging Adobe Sensei underneath for the text management. And what I could do, for example, is select this rich text again, click on the GenAI button, and actually benefit from many GenAI capabilities that are already embedded in the integration. So I could decide, for example, to rewrite the text and to add something around Iceland, around beach, and around surf in a very confident manner. Clicking on generate, this is going actually pretty fast and rewrote the text according to my needs. So now I could decide to change the tone maybe and go towards a more positive tone. I got something generated again, and I could even decide to elaborate a bit more. So the text should be a bit longer. Now, once I'm satisfied, I can directly apply the changes into the text location itself, or I can even decide to regenerate the content because actually I would like to try out another variation, like here. Looks like I'm satisfied, so let's just apply, and the text got inserted into the placeholder. Well, I think it screwed up a bit, actually, the whole layout. So let me just simplify, make it shorter, and apply again. And once this is done, of course, I'm able to publish this text directly from the editor to the application. So once again, the third lesson I'd like to share today is that the Universal Editor is a hub to apply innovation independently from the content sources of your customers, but also from the technical framework which is being used to render the application itself. I would like now to jump to a last demo, which will be the other way around. Our team is working, as Cedric mentioned before, on various VIP projects with various customers, should they be internal or external. And I'm going to show you what we have been doing around the experimentation topic, not directly within the Universal Editor in that case, but as close as possible to the customer and the business practitioner's need for a specific project and customer. And in that case, this customer was no one else than Adobe Express. So one other internal team, and as you know, the team was in charge of one of the rockstar products on the Creative Cloud side. And this is actually a pretty interesting use case for us, as the business practitioners require a lot of agility and velocity when it comes to create and manage content. They are running something like 100 experiments a year. So almost every week there is a new experiment being run, either for mobile or for the sub version of the website. I'm not going to disclaim any business goal or any KPI that's being measured, but I want to show you the process when it comes to design something out of a customer need in the context of a VIP project. The first use case I want to show you is actually something that happened early this year, so around January 1st, for the Japanese landing page of the Adobe Express product, as the Japanese team wanted to have a banner which would actually promote the usage of templates powered by Adobe Express and let users try them out to create and send wishes cards to friends, family, or business partners. What we've been doing is that we've been implementing a small experiment panel for the business practitioners to interact with before the page goes into production, and where they can actually either preview the control, which is this version of the page, or the challengers. In the context of this experiment, there was only a single challenger, so it was a 50-50 split. And as you can see, the challenger version had actually an extra banner inviting the users to go and click on the template to edit and to use later on. How does this work behind the scenes? As I told you, we have been working as close as possible to the practitioner needs. It appears that the practitioners are leveraging SharePoint, Microsoft Word, and Excel as sources for their content. So in the context of this very simple experiment, where actually the whole variation between the content and challenger is handled via content, we've been bringing a first feature that we call instant experiment. Doesn't require any development at all. The only thing that we need is the practitioner to go in the control page and add two metadata to the page metadata. The first one being the experiment ID, and the second one being actually the link to the challenger being deployed to the CDN. And on the challenger side, the only thing they had to do was to create a variation of the content. And sorry if you don't read Japanese, I think Ron can, but you have to trust me and to believe that this block is the one rendering the promotion banner that we have seen before on the website. Once this was done, it was a matter of publishing both control and challengers and having the experiment being run during 2 weeks, time to gather significant data back and evaluate whether the experiment was bringing a significant business lift. Another use case they had recently was actually on this experimentation page, where users can come in, upload their photo, and actually benefit from Express APIs directly to remove background of the image. And it appears that the flow is a bit too complicated, because there is an intermediate page that loads to enable people to upload their image and to play with the product. So we have been helping them in the context of a new experiment in order to bring a second variation of the page that would be very simply based on a single page flow. How does this work this time? Same thing than before, simply having two variations of the page, one with a specific block and the other, the challenger, with a new one. But as you can see, this required the development of a new block rendering the front end. So it's a bit more complex than an instant experiment. And for that, we've been working with the Express team to manage the experiment directly in an Excel sheet. Here, they are able to easily define control and challengers, the split, whether this should be uneven, the blocks that they want to use in terms of implementation, and the pages on which they want to apply the experiment. And here, I think that one of the or two benefits they have actually out of this solution is, first of all, they keep the whole experience management consistent and in a unique place, their SharePoint folder. They don't have to switch between UIs and how to start deporting content from one product to the other. And the second is that actually their challenger code implementation resides in the same GitHub repository than the core application itself. So once the experimentation is over and the challenger appears to win over the control, for example, it will be very simple to revert the challenger as the control version in terms of content and in terms of application. Why am I showing this to you? It's actually because I want to show you that engaging with customers at VIP project level helps also fostering customer value-driven innovation. This experimentation has underlying mechanics that will be beneficial, whatever the content repository will be, and hence will become candidates to be productized and integrated within the universal editor. Right now, to relate to Cedric's slide, we are mid-flight working with VIP customers at various projects level in order to solidify the feature itself before that. And this was the last demo on my side, so happy to give the mic back to Cedric.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm gonna take it from here. That was a fantastic demo. Thank you so much for showing us exactly what we got here and what happens. Okay, so we are out of time, but I am going to jump in here really quickly and give you just a quick preview of like the next sessions coming up, right? So we've got hands-on creating a site with new JavaScript blocks by my buddy Hannes. API tour, get to know the new APIs we shipped in the last 6 months by Mate. And we got Natalia and Carl going on tips and workflow for faster deployments with rapid development environment. So definitely check those out. The rest of the day, we have a bunch of other great sessions. We've got a break in between the first and the second. And then we've got more sessions right directly after that. It's third session, and then join us for sure for the closing session. We'll have a fireside chat. We'll bring Cedric back on, and our Senior Director of Engineering, Michael Mars. So thank you very much for joining us today, and have an absolutely fantastic Adobe Developers Live, and have a fantastic day. Thank you so much.